News, and we're here with our weekly Talk PG segment. And I'm joined today by Tracy Calogheros, Chuck Nisbett, Mackenzie Kerr, and Todd Corrigall will probably be joining us in a little bit. He's just tied up at the moment, but we're back at it. And this weekend, we turn our clocks forward, spring forward, fall back. It's that time of year again, but we've been having the discussion for a couple of these sessions now about whether we should simply do away with, I'm not sure which one it is, daylight saving. I think we'd stay permanently on daylight savings time, but essentially get rid of the time change. Let's, Chuck, let's start with you this week. What's your thoughts on getting rid of the time change?
Okay, I'm off for spring. I'm ready to go. But I don't think 1 hour difference is going to make too much difference. I think we should leave the time change alone because it messes with me every year. Every year I have to try and figure out when it's happening. I never know exactly when to do it. And suddenly I wake up one morning and my watch tells me that we're an hour earlier than I was. And I'm like, oh, okay. And trying to get caught up again. And I don't really think it makes that much difference, you know. We get long days during the summer, short days during the winter, and everybody just kind of gets used to it anyway. So I think we should just leave it be, and it makes it a lot easier relating to other time zones and other places without having to deal with that.
Yeah, there you go. Tracy, your thoughts on keeping the time or getting rid of the time change?
Yeah, I'm way better at falling back than springing forward, let me tell you. I don't like losing that hour, but I do like the extra daylight at the time that you get it this way. So I'd be all for staying on the time zone we're about to go back into. And I think too, from a business standpoint, it would make sense to align ourselves with at least the neighboring bodies that we're doing business with. But in this world, I mean, everything is so interconnected. I think pick one and stick with it. I know there's lots of talk for farmers, and it has to do originally with maximizing the light when you can be working, but I think we can adjust. Let's just stick to the daylight savings time version and be done with it, because boy, the moving back and forth, the older I get, the harder it is.
Yeah. Mackenzie, your thoughts on staying
Sure.
on one side?
Yeah, I was talking about this the other day a little bit when I was remembering that I needed to change my clock back, but I don't really need to do much of that changing because all of my devices do it for me. So that's really nice now, is I barely notice. I don't have to do anything by myself, but I definitely notice, you know, like just mental health wise, it's really hard when you're losing an hour, and, you know, it's really nice when you get more daylight. The reason that I think it came into place in the first place, but I'm not totally sure, was because of it was right after World War II and business hours and something to do with that. But I think that we have just come so far since then that we can adapt and figure out a way that, you know, we don't have this flipping back and forth all the time. I think that we
Oh, I think we lost Mackenzie.
Yep, I think she's got a freeze going on there.
Hopefully she
missed the time change. That's what's going on here.
in some.
Oh, here we go. It's Mackenzie back.
Come back.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
That is the statement of the year on Zoom.
Yeah, exactly. Can you hear me now? I was just mentioning how when I grew up in the Yukon, you know, it's dark most of the winter, and in the summer it is sunny all summer throughout the night. I think I'm frozen again. I can't see them moving.
We can hear you. Your video's just not moving.
Oh, okay. Well, that's okay because you can still hear me. But yeah, I think that we can definitely stick to just one time and not change back and forth. And I think that would benefit a lot of people. So
didn't we have a vote on this recently? And I thought overwhelmingly people wanted it to just stick to one. Am I
Yeah, the
remembering that
province
wrong?
held a poll about a year or so ago, and um, I think everybody overwhelmingly wanted to keep the one time zone, or the one they keep it the same time without changing.
Yeah.
I'm the same way. I think the change is simply annoying, and do we really need it? And I'm not sure what it benefits. And maybe it did at one point in time that it actually benefited to change. And I don't know. With our work schedules now, I could see it maybe when everybody was on a 9 to 5 schedule, but now everybody works. People in the hospitals work 12-hour shifts. Other people are working, Thursday to Saturday, and other people Monday to Friday. And I think everything is just kind of streams now. So I don't know that we need it. But Todd Corrigall's here now, and we'll ask Todd for his views on whether we need to continue to change to daylight savings time twice a year and back, given that we have to spring forward this weekend.
No, thanks for the opportunity.
Okay, next question.
It's frustrating. It's frustrating because our premier brought this up as like cannon fodder for an election 18 months ago and said, we won't do anything without Governor Inslee and Newsom and the other sort of surrounding states in the US, which from a trade perspective, I can appreciate that. But Chetwynd, you cross the Pine Pass and they're on mountain time. So it's, I think, inconsequential in the grand scheme of things. I think we make policy decisions based on what's best for our constituents, not what's best for another country. And our constituents here, as far as I can tell, have been calling for years and years and years to do away with this. I mean, I might be regurgitating someone else's response now, and I apologize for joining late. But this was farmers. This was done for farmers back in the day to provide greater daylight for seeding and getting their crops. And even farmers say now, we have lights. We have lights on our equipment. We have floods in the fields. I mean, this is silly. This just doesn't need to happen. I think, the interesting stats that I always go back to on this are ICBC stats and other insurer stats on the number of accidents that take place in and around time changes due to just generally overtired or adjustments quickly that have to occur as a result of it. So it's an antiquated system. I think there's, it's such a quick win for a politician to do it. So yeah, I'd leave it there.
Yeah, I don't understand. Well, I don't understand farming from a long time ago because I don't know how the time change benefits the farmer. I grew up on a farm, and my dad was always up with the crack of dawn, whether it was didn't matter what time was on the clock. That's when things had to move. But it's interesting about how it helps anybody. I think of Creston, which is a farming community, and they have for years simply moved the sign from one side of town to the other. So they never change their clocks. All they do is change the sign. So when it's daylight savings time, when you come in from one side, you're on the rest of BC time, and when the rest of the year, the time changes on the other side of town. So to me, it's kind of like I look at these things are kind of it really is
brilliant,
right?
So much is arbitrary. I mean,
Yeah.
this is one of those things that probably belongs in a museum rather than something that we're all still trying to live by.
Yeah. But I'll agree with
I
you.
actually love that you get these super long summer nights. I just think it's amazing.
Yeah.
When I lived in Alberta, it just seemed like the sun just didn't go down. I
lived in Yellowknife. It didn't go down.
Well, that's the thing. But, and I was young, so we just used to party all night anyhow. So it was great.
Yeah, right on. So on that, it's time to change topics. I think that one's kind of beat to death. But the other thing that's happening now, of course, this week is we're finally being able to schedule vaccines for people this week over 90, today over 80, I believe the phone lines. is this, let's go back to Chuck, is this due, is this time, or is this, have we waited too long? I guess there's lots of concern that Canada is behind the 8 ball when it's time to roll out the vaccine. Do you think we've been laggards in this regard, or do you think we're on track?
We may have been a little slow, you know. Our supply hasn't been what we wanted right away, but we don't, as far as G7, G8, G20 countries go, we don't have a huge population to deal with. And most of our people are in set populations pretty close together. You know, except that you get up to us in our outlying rural areas. But most of the population is in areas that can be accessed pretty quickly. So I think we can get ahead of this pretty quick. You know, yesterday was 90, today's 80. Maybe in a couple of days, we'll be down to the 70s. And then we really it's going to be longer to go through those next few periods, right? With those next age groups. But I think we can get ahead of it pretty quickly and stay ahead of it. As long as we have a steady supply now, you know, and that's what they're saying we have now. We have a steady supply. But if there's disruptions again, it's going to cause problems again. So as long as we've got a steady supply, I think we're okay. Just let's get on it and keep it going.
Tracy, do you think our supply is secure now? And are we on track for getting what was promised? And even though we're lagging behind federally in terms of a number of people getting vaccinated per capita to some other areas?
Yeah, you know, I don't think that you can measure our situation by what's going on in other areas. We don't have our own vaccine production in Canada. And by not having our own vaccine production, we are at the mercy of how it is being developed elsewhere. And we certainly weren't about to change the situation in March of 2020 when we realized we're going to need to make our own vaccines. So this speaks to that longer range planning where we made cuts and decided not to be investing in that in Canada. We are paying the price for it right now. But the fact is, we are on schedule from exactly where we were at. So like in January, when they were first bringing these out and saying Canadians would all by September be able to be vaccinated if they wanted to be, I think we're still at that same schedule or perhaps a little bit ahead of it. I'm watching it really closely because I'm trying to figure out when to reopen the museum. And I don't think that can happen until the bulk of the population is vaccinated. So I'm paying really close attention to what the timelines look like. I think we're pretty much on the schedule the government told us we were going to be on. And I really am sick to death of people politicizing it. I don't mean people on this panel. I mean the politicians out there using this rollout as a weapon and wielding it from a purely partisan standpoint. There is nothing I can think of that is less partisan than protecting the population from this virus. And so every time I hear a politician smack another one with this, it just makes me angry. And it makes me that much less willing to trust our politicians. And I think that anybody in elected office right now ought to realize that and pay attention to it. It's not helpful.
Mackenzie, has there been too much politics played here with of us being too critical of how quickly we rolled out the vaccine? Are we being too harsh on ourselves?
I think that there definitely has been a lot of politicization. It's not helpful in any way. All of you are frozen. I know you can see me moving, but it's really funny because Todd was drinking his water bottle and it's just like stuck there. So it looks like he's been drinking his water bottle for like 8 minutes. But yeah, I watched Question Period the other day when they were asking and about the vaccine rollout, and they were just pointing fingers, right? One person was saying it's all Adrian Dick's fault, and the other was saying it's all TELUS's fault. How is that helping us? And, my grandma will be phoning soon. I told her, today is the day that she can phone. She's over 80, but the phone lines are going to be so busy. I told her probably phone tomorrow or the next day because, today you're just going to be sitting on your phone all day waiting. And you'll get really anxious. So, phone over the next couple days here. And I'm very surprised that they didn't do it like an election and sending out something in the mail or phoning people that are over 90 to book the appointments, because I was watching on Twitter, and the number of people that actually phoned in to book appointments was really low compared to what they were thinking it was going to be, but they had a ton of phone calls because people were trying to skip the line. So I'm just, surprised that we've had a really long time to figure this out. So I'm surprised that they're rolling it out like this. I'm happy that we're finally starting, but yeah, I'm disappointed in our politicians just pointing fingers back and forth in the question period yesterday. So
maybe that's an argument for more federal control over the rollout, and that then strays into provincial jurisdiction, because healthcare is a provincial jurisdiction. But I think that this is a pretty clear example in Canada of where we're having a problem. My grandmother, who is 96, is getting her second shot this week. My father-in-law, who's in his 80s, just got booked in for his shot here in BC, and he goes in on March 19th. So the variation within Canada says to me that we need federal control, not provincial control, over things like this.
yeah, we have federal elections, and you could do the rollout the same way. So, trying to contact everyone, it's a similar process. So yeah, I'm just surprised at that.
Todd, your thoughts on the vaccine rollout? Too much politics here, and should the feds be having a greater say in how this is all done?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. And Tracy and I had this discussion previously. I think this was certainly a case for the federal government to step up and show leadership in an area where it becomes challenging to roll downhill. They could have had a lot of strategy from an implementation standpoint of a number of issues around COVID that they passed on to the provinces, and I understand rationale behind that. The politicization piece of this is interesting. I jumped on the train yesterday because I thought Minister Dix's comments were abhorrent. You are an elected leader. You don't throw other people under the bus when you're the person responsible for the plan. You've been there since day one. I'm not besmirching anyone's job that they've done and the work that they've put into it, because it's been hard on a lot of people. And I can't imagine for those who are deeply immersed in this on a day-to-day basis how challenging it's been. But as a leader, the first thing you do not do is throw your team under the bus and those that are supporting you. You take ownership for the problem, you find solutions, and you move forward. Apologizing goes very, very far. Besmirching a corporation that's probably done so much good in our country, across the country, through the years for political gain is terrible. I was disgusted by that. But neither here nor there. I called just now. This is why I was late. I called at 11:45 to register my mother-in-law, who turned 80 on Sunday. I called, I grew up in the era of radio contests, so I've got a quick redial finger. Probably went about 8 times. I got through. I sat on hold for 10 minutes. It took 10 minutes to register, and she goes on the 20th. So it was a pretty easy process, all said and done. Now, having said that, where the Fed and or the provinces could have stepped up was it's 2021. Why the hell are we doing this over the phone exclusively? Why does Fraser Health have phone and online and no other health authority does? These silos are just creating bigger problems in this process. Arbitrary decision-making from one region to another is challenging. We saw, it was announced yesterday that Prince Rupert, all residents of Prince Rupert would be vaccinated by April 1st, I believe, because of surging numbers there. Well, we had surging numbers here. Chuck can attest to that. His wife was ground zero. But we were never front and center in any of these, renewed calls, and that's challenging to look at. So, if federal strategy cleans up process, I'm all for it.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I'm still shaking my head at too. This is 1 year now that we're into the pandemic, and we knew from day one that sometime we're going to have to roll out the vaccine. And you get the impression that the vaccine rollout plan has been worked on for like the last couple of weeks. It probably hasn't, but this should have all been tested and ready to go as soon as the vaccines were ready. That's the part that I shake my head at, is that we knew this day was going to come. So why haven't we done this a little bit better? Mackenzie, you were going to say something?
Yeah, and I mean, teachers, last year at this time, I was, in my university semester, and they had to change to online learning in a few days. And I'm just so surprised that we've had this long and we don't have an online rollout, but only one jurisdiction does. I think it just furthers that rural urban divide and that divisiveness that we have between communities, and how we, it's just feeding into this larger problem that we have. This is this is something that we have to fight as a community and all together, just like climate change. And we need to be together. And if we're having things like this divide us even more, it's just going to slow down, reaching the end, or the light at the end of the tunnel of, getting these COVID vaccines. So I think that's really disappointing, because I didn't actually, my feed is just a constant stream of news. So I didn't actually notice that they had an online rollout in that jurisdiction. So yeah, that makes me pretty upset to hear when we have just as much capability to do that up here in every jurisdiction, not just ones that are in urban areas. So
yeah, and it's my understanding that once we get to the under 80 age group, it will be online. There will be an online registration. I think.
But that goes back to your earlier comment, Bill. We've known the day was coming.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? I mean, you can redesign a website nowadays in 3 months, not a year like it used to take. You can set up cloud-based servers in a week. These processes should have been going on in the background the entire time to support this process. Because again, granted, a 90-year-old, a 90-plus-year-old, or my 80-plus-year-old mother-in-law or Tracy's father is likely not hopping on the internet to register, but my 75-year-old father certainly is.
Yeah,
and he's in
That's all
Toronto.
well and good.
He can do it.
But that doesn't work for the 18-year-old living on reserve in northern BC that doesn't have access. So,
but there's also different processes in place for some of those remote and Indigenous communities, which they've staggered those ages too, and I think that's probably to accommodate it. I was on the phone this morning with a colleague in Fort Nelson, and she said, we could vaccinate our entire community in probably 3 days. She's like, it'd be great if they just did sort of like rolling vaccine caravans, start in one area and just start like converging into a center. And so it's an interesting thought to go behind, because then you do have community vaccination as opposed to like little pockets and segments that remain unvaccinated.
See, that makes so much more sense when you're out in the outlying regions as compared to the urban centers, right? To just go in and do a community, just boom, let's just do it.
But as with everything else, they're focused on the urban centers. And so there isn't a focus being placed on small rural communities that are remote, because they're not a big enough voting population to drive the attention that needs to be had. Even Prince George gets ignored, and we're not a tiny little city. So I don't know what the solution is, but this is just one more example of rural Canada being stuck at the whims of urban Canada. And I don't think it's right.
Yeah. Go ahead, Chuck.
Well, I think that it really needs to change. That the whole approach to rural Canada, it can't be done the same way. I mean, you're going to end up with, you're going to have your 3 90-year-olds in town, and the 20 80-year-olds in town are all going to be vaccinated, and the whole rest of the town is going to be going, what? So let's just, you can bring it in for them. Why not bring it into it? Like and most of these places, you could pick like a school gym or something, a central area, and have it done in a day or 2 3 days.
We only have one clinic here, Chuck. It's going to be the Civic Center. So, it's mass descending into the center of the community. And I think, it's an interesting point that you make. The 90-year-old and the 80-year-old are likely staying in their home, long-term care, apartment, whatever it might be. But the 50, 40, 30, 20-year-olds are going to work. In some instances, many offices and retail locations are full, open to capacity. And the higher risk of transmission comes there and then Mackenzie going back to visit her grandmother and transmitting it to her, who transmits it to people in her circle. So there's a lot of sense to be made from what you're saying.
Yeah, it just
Yeah,
seems
and I live with her too, so it's like I'm not just visiting, like I'm leaving almost every day to do things and get groceries and everything, and then I'm coming back here every single day, right? And it's good because she's not lonely, but it's high risk. So we were talking about if I could get vaccinated because I live with her, what that could look like, but that you can't skip the line dependent on age, right? So it's because I'm not a care worker at all, right? I'm just living here with her. So yeah, it's something that we've thought about.
Well, and that's why like community focus, like my colleague in Fort Nelson was saying, would be interesting, because you run into these policy challenges when you say, oh, you're living with somebody who's in this bracket, so you get vaccinated. So it becomes this sort of like micromanagement nightmare, as opposed to saying, Fort Nelson's getting vaccinated this week. Dawson Creek, you are the next 8 days, just and push that way.
Realistically, though, I mean, vaccination is great and it's going to save a lot of lives, but it's not going to end the need for social distancing. And so I think our goal here has to be to get everybody vaccinated, and how we roll that out is really splitting hairs. It's about getting the most vulnerable vaccinated and then ripping through the rest of the population as fast as we can, because it looks like this is going to be endemic and there's likely going to be needed annual boosters, at least in the short term.
Well, and I think what becomes interesting from that point too, Tracy, is, and I apologize to the makers of this because I can't remember which one it was. It's either Johnson & Johnson or AstraZeneca that has 65% efficacy. Who gets that shot? What is it, an age group that gets that? Is it 20-year-olds because they're more resilient, or is it 90-year-olds because they're older? So there's that whole discussion around that comes up in my mind too. If Pfizer is 97, 98% effective, and AstraZeneca was 65% effective, well, I know what my choice would be.
I think the efficacy numbers are dangerous to play with, though, because realistically, they're all effective at preventing death, and that's ultimately the goal of all of them. And I know that in that lower efficacy rate, they were talking about the lack of testing in certain age groups, and that's where the efficacy rate has to be shown as lower. It's the same logic behind splitting the first and second doses here in BC. Initially, they were saying that the first dose only had about 50 to 60% protection. In real time, now we've seen that actually, in fact, that first dose is giving about 90% protection pretty quickly. We don't know how long that'll last, so you still need the booster, but we can push that booster off and get more people vaccinated. So I'm always leery of the efficacy numbers, because I think it's making people feel that they have to pick one vaccine over another, when really the best vaccine for you is the one you can get.
True, that's very true. But then you've got to also think of the home down in Kelowna, where everyone was vaccinated, and they've got a second outbreak going. And they're saying that second outbreak is much lower virility, so that people are riding through it a lot easier because they have had the vaccine. But it's still another outbreak with people who are vaccinated. So that's something to consider too. So this is going to need to be, everyone's going to need to be vaccinated, but just don't think that stops the whole pandemic, and as Tracy says, it's probably going to become endemic, and we're going to need yearly boosters or every 2 years or whatever it will be. This is in the air, and it's going to stay in the air. It's not going over.
Do you know, is that that new outbreak? I'd heard about that, but I didn't see whether it was the initial strain or if it was a variant. Do you know if it was a variant?
I think they were saying that it's a variant that they've got, they're thinking.
And
I know that the South African one has the ability to evade some of the vaccine and even just natural immunity.
Wow.
And I think on that outbreak, they were also saying that some of the people who were getting sick again had been vaccinated, but they had recontracted the virus between the time being vaccinated and I guess it takes a couple of weeks before the vaccine in your system
fully strong. Yeah.
So that's when they got reinfected again. So I don't know. There's all kinds of crazy stuff there. So
it's kind of the same situation as with my wife, and she got her first shot, but within a week after getting that first shot, she got sick. So, you know, the first shot hadn't even achieved full effectiveness yet. And she was infected again by through work, right? So
That's not new with viruses either. I mean, I've had chickenpox twice. It just happens. Sometimes you get infected again.
Yeah.
We did have a question online from Elizabeth Viken, whether any of us who work in the healthcare industry. So we said it'd be nice if we did, but we will tell her that Chuck's wife does. So that's about as close we get to the healthcare industry. So thanks.
It would be good to have some specialists on this panel to talk once
Yeah.
in a while. And so it takes a little bit more planning, which none of us have time for these days. But yeah, I think it'd be great if we could bring some specialists on in various areas and then focus this conversation around that.
Yeah, because one of the things I find interesting about the vaccine rollout is that they don't seem to be wanting to go the pharmacy route, and it seems to me that we have this whole infrastructure that's set up for vaccines, and yet we're not going to use it. And I'm not entirely sure why.
Well, that's surprising.
Yeah. I guess part of it is that we need more controls over it, and there's a lot of you have to keep track of everybody because there's follow-ups and all that kind of stuff, and it all has to be coordinated the same way, and perhaps if it's done in a whole bunch of different ways, then that's where problems arise.
From what I hear, it's not a quick process to get the vaccination, because they have to fill in a bunch of records, make sure that everything's recorded properly and everything. So it can take 20 minutes or so to get it all done, but that may be why they don't want to go through the pharmacy route. I'm not sure really.
Yeah. And maybe because they require freezers and stuff like that.
That's probably it with the really cold ones.
Yeah. That's probably a big part of it. There's also the issue around this about whether, what they call vaccine passports, whether we'll get issued certificates of immunization. Todd, any thoughts on getting a vaccine passport?
It's a great idea. I think we're going to start to see other jurisdictions outside of Canada that mandate some type of proof of vaccination to travel there, which is, we talk about provincial rights and we talk about municipal rights and the challenges that come with charter rights in Canada, but there's nothing stopping the US border protection from saying, let me see that you've been vaccinated, or French immigration or anything from saying that. So I would be, I think, more surprised if countries didn't start implementing that for out-of-country travelers, or depending what their own constitutions look like. So I think it's a matter of time. Will we see that locally? No, I don't think you'll have a gate set up in the Rockies to enter into Alberta to prove you've been vaccinated, and vice versa. But I don't see an issue with it. I have friends, like I mentioned, I live in Yellowknife, and so their Northwest Territories is vaccinating everybody en masse. It's not by age, everyone's just being vaccinated. And that's obviously population size plays a significant role in that. And I think you can store the shot outside, probably still there right now. But they're getting cards that say, I've been vaccinated. I think I'd have to look at the picture again to be sure, but I believe it said vaccine passport on it.
Yeah. Well, I find it interesting because when I was in high school, I went to Japan on a school trip, and we had to get vaccinated. I can't remember what it was for, to go over there. And we had basically, I still remember it, and I think I still have it. It's a little sort of, it's like a passport. It's a little thing probably about the size of a wallet or the size of your phone. And it just had pages in it. And when you got vaccinated, the nurse filled in what you got vaccinated for, or whoever vaccinated you, and you carried. And when we went overseas back then, you had to take that with you. That was one of the things we had to present at the border to show that we had been vaccinated against, I think it was cholera at the time. But so, like, these are nothing new. So I don't see any problems with
it. Still goes on. There's lots of countries and places in the world you can't go without getting vaccinated for whatever the ailment is.
Well, here in BC, when we were first starting up our after school care program, in order to become licensed, I had to go and get vaccinated for everything. And I don't even work with the kids one-on-one, but I've got TB and you name it. There was a whole raft. I had 6 or 7 different vaccinations I had to have, and it was a requirement for us to be licensed.
Yeah. Right on.
Yeah, when I traveled when I was a young kid, very small, my family went to Uruguay, and I remember having to get vaccinated for that. And I went with the college to study forestry in Costa Rica for 2 weeks, and I had to get Hep A and B and some other things. And I don't know if that one was mandatory, but they said you should get this before I went. So I don't remember bringing, a passport with me, but I remember them saying, okay, this is on your list of things you need to do. How enforced that was, I'm not really sure. I did it because I know that it would be the smart thing to do. I mean, it's so funny when people bring up, this issue of, well, I don't want my rights to be infringed upon. I don't want to, have to take this to travel. And it's like, yeah, but you already do. But it's just such a narrow-minded echo chamber that they're in, right? And so it's just funny when we already have that happening right now.
Everyone has that right to choose, right? If you want to be an anti-vaxxer and you feel like you've read the research that supports your decisions, that's your given right to make that decision. But it's another country's given right to say that you're not welcome there because of that decision.
That's exactly it. I'm not an anti-vaxxer in any which way, but somehow I seem to be anti-passport. I have never got a passport. My family drives me nuts. They bug me all the time, and it makes traveling difficult. But I always seem to muddle through. I don't know. But
I'm interested to see what happens with employers in Canada.
Well, I can see that happening too. People going, yeah, you need to be vaccinated to work here and work there. So yeah, I guess I'm going to have to carry some sort of passport eventually.
Well, and it's been defined, COVID-19 is defined now in Canada as a workplace hazard. And I, as an employer, am responsible to protect my employees from workplace hazards. Well, how can I do that if I can't require that everyone be vaccinated? And I know it hasn't yet made it all the way to a court and been tested, and I am certain that it will be, but I'm really struggling with that piece. How do you protect people and also respect their ability to make choices? And I need someone smarter than me to answer that question.
Well, Brenda, my wife, she works in Jubilee Lodge, and she was put on WCB because she contracted it at work, right? So it's got to be looked at that way now. You could possibly catch it for work. I work outdoors with people all the time, and if I contracted it through contact with somebody at work, same kind of thing will happen, right? So yeah, I can see where they're going with this, and it's gonna be that for certain jobs, you're gonna have to prove that you have that vaccine. You have that vaccination. Otherwise, they'll go, well, do we really want to risk having you around? It's a risk for an employer, right?
Think about how many jobs and things require you to prove negative tests already, right? So that's almost more extreme than proving you've had a vaccination, because that's immediate health information that is supposed to be held in privacy. But they can demand that now. I think to Tracy's point, there is going to be a significant lawsuit somewhere sometime soon in Canada from the exact story that Tracy just told that will be the precedent for everything moving forward on this. And it will be a significant one to watch, because it will likely be one of our largest employers in the country that faces that down.
Yeah, it certainly is interesting, because in a lot of workplaces, you're required to have certain things now. You've got to have your WHMIS training. If you're going to be a surgeon, well, you kind of have to have a PhD. And is a COVID vaccination anything? I guess it's different in that it's not training. It's something that you have physical, and I can see the argument the other way too, is that it's discriminatory if I don't have it, because you don't want to hire me simply because I haven't got vaccinated against something. So
nobody's screaming though about all the sites that require drug tests from their employees.
Exactly.
Yeah.
basketball players in the NBA. If you're 6 foot, you're a short guy, right? So nobody complains that yeah, he's only 6 foot and he can't dunk, right? So you know, it's
Don't besmirch Muggsy Bogues right now.
You know, there are those that can dunk at 6 foot, but it's few and far between. And yeah, it's going to become a requirement like anything else. You know, if you want to play forward for the Lakers, you better be 6'10". That's the way it is.
I have some people commenting on my Instagram live talking about how in elementary and secondary schools you have to get like measles and things like that. So, you know, a vaccine passport isn't such a crazy thing. And some people are also saying, you know, you can make the choice, but you're not free from the consequences. And other countries already have this already. So we just have to be sharing that information so that people are hearing that constantly. The ones that are, you know, the skeptical ones, I feel like we need to, you know, be posting, these are the countries that currently already have these kinds of restrictions, and this, you know, it's already here, because we just have such short attention spans that when we hear this, we don't actually do our research to see, oh, this is already a thing in our world, because we like to be in our echo chamber, right?
We could be worrying about nothing too, because the percentage of Canadians that are now saying that they will willingly take the vaccine continually is rising. So, you know, maybe we're just making much ado about nothing here.
Yeah, and the health professionals that I've seen, they basically, the number they bandied around from the beginning for what we term as herd immunity is around 70 to 75%. So if we get that many people that are willing, then the people who don't get vaccinated, in a essence, kind of get a free ride, because that will take care of the virus theoretically. That's the theory behind herd immunity anyway. So I think the goal is that if we get a vast majority, probably 3/4 vaccinated, we'll be in a much better position, I think. So,
but that's a larger story. Sorry,
go ahead, Todd. No, you go ahead, Todd. I'll let you do it.
I was just going to agree with you. I think, you know, if I think we've risen to that point where I think it was 78%, I think was the last number I saw, Canadians that they said would get the vaccine. My concern isn't so much Canadians doing it, though. It's people that are traveling here. And let's take Brazil, because the Brazil variant seems to be the one that is the most challenging to address and spreads the fastest. If somebody were to travel here from Brazil and infect people considerably with that, like, that's where I think the Canadian government has a significant role to play in this. If other countries are going to implement something like that, and you know, it's not follow the leader. You could be a leader in this and say, listen, you can't come to Canada unless you've been vaccinated. And sorry, that's the rule we make to protect our citizens.
And where I was going with it was simply that even if we get 78% of the population vaccinated, that doesn't solve my problem as an employer. Because if I have staff who are immunocompromised, who I know can't have vaccines, I can't tell them that I'm protecting them if I don't know who's been vaccinated on my staff, or make it a requirement short of a medical exemption. That's the piece I'm most concerned about, because I agree with you. I think that the bulk of the population will be responsible and get vaccinated, and that for the most part, we will manage to push this into the endemic world. But as an employer, I have to think about protection for the organization that I'm operating, as well as for the individuals that work for me. And I don't know how to navigate that, and no one can give me an answer on it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Is where it comes up in the workplace. That could be a very thorny issue.
Once again, a lawyer is going to make a lot of money off this.
As always. Yeah, I know. I should have been a lawyer, but alas, I'm not. So.
We're lawyers. We pick on them, but we really do need them.
Yeah, you do need lawyers sometimes. So, yeah. Although I when I was in the newspaper world, I cracked a joke at a lawyer's expense in the paper one time, and holy man, I tell you, not a sense of humor. I don't know.
Let me guess, you got sued.
What's that? No, I didn't get sued, but there was a nasty comment about, you know,
just a cease and desist, just the initial push.
Hey,
on the other hand,
who's third-year law student, trust me, I know.
Yeah. on the other hand, the lawyer we had on retainer to help us when we did get nasty letters, let me tell you, nobody could write better than him as far as I was concerned, because there were some really nice, well-written letters that were basically telling people to get lost and don't ever come back, but really done in a nice way.
It's amazing how decorated the F word can get when it's like
Exactly.
surrounded by this beautiful terminology.
Yeah.
I've never had more fun than sitting down talking to lawyers, because they're brilliant people, and I love having conversations with really intelligent people, like these Wednesday conversations. But the way they navigate through a thought process is just like, it's so beautiful to see such strategic thinking in action like that.
If that's the most fun you're having in life, you need to get out more. Hurry up and get a vaccine.
It's a pandemic, damn it.
That's right.
Todd's watching YouTube videos on lawyers for his fun because he can't go anywhere.
I'm just watching old episodes of LA Law. That's it. I'm just catching up.
There you go.
Yeah, you know, I'm watching old episodes of UFO from 1970, so don't worry, you're doing good.
Well, we actually watched Downton Abbey. I hate to admit it, but I actually watched it. So, and speaking of Downton Abbey and all things British and royal, we do our segue into the real issue in the world, the one that has the most importance these days. Meghan and Harry's big bombshell interview with Oprah. Did anybody watch that? And any thoughts on what the heck?
Oh, my Nana did. Whole thing.
What's
It
that?
was late too. It was like till 10 p.m. past her bedtime. Yeah, I mean, I'll go first. I think it's just, people should not be surprised that they're racist, and like why is this such big news? I think it's really great that, you know, Oprah was able to interview them and they can share their story. And I really hate that people were skeptical of her depression and suicidal thoughts. And there was a little meme going around saying, Meghan's not going to read your messages saying that you are skeptical of her, but your family members and friends that are feeling the same thoughts will, and now you are no longer safe.
Oh, I think we lost Mackenzie there.
Yep, I think she's frozen.
I certainly didn't watch this, and I have no intentions of watching it, because the monarchy is ridiculous. We talk about down with the patriarchy. Why the hell do we have monarchies, for God's sakes? But aside from that, to Mackenzie's point, and this is something that I think,
For them
you
to
know,
talk to, so
needs to
they
be
really-
talked about quite regularly, is that mental health doesn't stop because you're a millionaire or because you're famous or because you're this, that, and the other. I mean, how many famous people kill themselves with drugs and alcohol, which is likely due in significant part to some form of mental health challenges. In some way, shape, or form, whether people want to admit it or not, we all deal with it, whether it's hard and direct or whether it's on the periphery of our lives or a loved one. It's like cancer. In some way, shape, or form, we've all been touched by mental health and will continue to be touched by mental health. And our current health crisis situation plays a very, very significant role in that. I can't count the number of conversations I've had in the last 4 weeks, probably, of people who are really starting to get challenged as this moves forward, with just, you know, how generally busy 2021 has been for so many people. Extra workload, extra challenges, extra unknowns about a lot of different things. And I tell you, I mean, I feel it on a day-to-day basis. It is a struggle. And until people view mental health as just a health challenge, it's still going to be, unfortunately, so poorly stigmatized that we still see a lot of challenges with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Chuck,
Yeah,
I don't know if you watched the big interview.
I did watch it. I watched all of it.
Yeah.
And this is unusual for me. I'm a British-born black man. And I've never had anything to do really with the monarchy. I mean, I didn't even go to Buckingham Palace when I was a kid. And I just thought, okay, I got to see what the story is here, right? And I watched the whole thing, and it was very interesting and very revealing. These two have obviously, yeah, sure, they're having the problems with the family, as many people do, but they're also very, very media savvy. And they know what they're doing in an interview, and they know how to place blame while saying they're not telling anybody anything. And they did a very good job. And I'm not coming down on one side or the other. I think it's wrong that anybody should be held back from the help they need when they're having suicidal thoughts or feeling like they're being oppressed and held back by family members. But you know, it was, if you haven't watched it, I think you should watch it because it's kind of interesting. It's an insight into a different world that we don't often get. And it's maybe a more open look than many people would think that you would have. But it was very, very interesting. It really was. And I think everyone should take a look and just don't judge. You know, I mean, everybody's life situations are a little bit different, and everybody handles things a little bit differently. So don't come down too hard. Just take a look and see what they perceive as their life being.
Tracy?
Yeah, okay, I'm judging. I'm coming down on Meghan's side. And I'm sick to death of people with this false equivalency of, oh, well, we weren't there, so we don't really know. We're talking about rich royal billionaires and we're shocked that they're racist. Look at what happened to Diana. The big shock to me was that Buckingham Palace has an HR department. That I thought was really weird. And then that they wouldn't help Meghan. Yeah, they're rich. Yeah, they're media savvy, and there's probably things in their life that the rest of us could never really relate to. But I can relate to the fact that she's a woman, and I can relate to the fact that people are doubting her. And I can imagine what that's done to her state of mind. Having been there myself from a lousy situation that I should have been believed on when I was a whole lot younger and wasn't, and it still impacts my life today. So I say good for them for standing up to an institution that must have been scary as hell to stand up to, and good for Oprah for backing them up. She's not always my favorite, but in this instance, I think she did the right thing, and I think they've handled it with some tact. And I'm Team Meghan. I think that good for her for getting the heck out of that. You know, the other piece that I did hear that related to Canada that I thought was interesting was the notion that they'd considered Harry as the next Governor General. I imagine that's out the window at the moment, but it would have been a really cool solution. But yeah, I think the subtext here is nobody should be shocked that an out-of-date institution like the monarchy is racist or sexist. I think Diana told us everything that we needed to know way back. So good for them and good on Oprah. And yes, I'm judging.
There you go. We have Mackenzie back, so I think we got cut off there. I'm not sure if you were going to add anything onto that, or
I'm not sure what you heard, but can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I was just saying that, you know, at the beginning, I'm not shocked, and that I think that people should, you know, be listening to her and 100% her side. And if you're not, then you need to really look in the mirror and, you know, figure out why you think that, what is ingrained in you that has made you to believe that you shouldn't believe women when they share these things. So yeah, I'm not surprised. It also brought up some conversations on TikTok and Twitter of leaving the monarchy again. And so I thought that was really interesting, but we only have 2 minutes left, so we don't have time to talk about that. But I think that that was something that people were also talking about, and what that would look like. And it would actually be a really great avenue to do the land back movement for Indigenous people as well, because they're tied to the crown. And so like what that would look like, it was super interesting to lean into that conversation as well on social media over the last couple of days.
Yeah, I think one of my takeaways to that is that people are shocked that there's racism in the royal family. Well, isn't the royal family basically the poster child for colonialism worldwide? So so we shouldn't be shocked that there's, but once again, we don't know exactly what happened. It could have been an offhand comment from somebody that was off color and ill thought. Who knows, right? That's the problem with a lot of these things, is that nobody really knows. But yeah, I take all the points that, yeah, it's pretty.
I don't buy that, Bill. We do know, Megan told us, and women don't make statements like that because it gets them anything. She doesn't need money. She doesn't need fame. And it certainly hasn't helped her any. She's now being attacked all over the world for telling her truth and what actually happened to her. I'm not okay with this. We don't really know what happened. She told us.
I agree. I don't think she would have gone there if it didn't happen. I really don't. And knowing British people and the reserve that is in the background of so many of the old British families, yeah, I can see this. I really can. And I don't see why anybody's doubting it. I mean, depression happens to a lot of people. And I don't know why it was even considered to be a bad thing for her to go forward and get help for it. It just makes no sense. But it's the reserve that is the British Reserve, and it's there in the background of pretty much everything that happens in England. And if you go there and spend any length of time there, you go, oh yeah, right. It's just.
But it's not just all Monty Python. Here, I thought that was what Britain was.
The old keep calm and carry on.
It's the Britain that everyone wants it to be.
And on that note, I wave my genitalia in your general direction.
Oh, I think we better end on that note. So thanks everyone. Thanks Tracy and Chuck and Todd and Mackenzie, and thanks everyone for watching. We've come up on our hour, and we will see you again next week.